going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. Hope everybody's having a good day on this Friday, September 23rd of 2022. To the astute listener, we're obviously recording 2 days late, but there's a very important reason for that. And I think everybody's going to be really happy when we do this show. Before we get into anything fun, please give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes, spread this word of mouth, go find us on social medias at the Alex Cuesta Show, or just go search for that. You'll find us there. You'll see my nice bland logo. As always with me, David, what's going on, dude?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited for the show today. Very excited for the show today. Covers a topic we've talked about before, but I think it's rightly talked about a lot more than just once or twice. So
it's a topic we talked about before, but we have somebody on here that can talk with a lot more authority and a lot more knowledge on it, because he's someone that over the last 2+ years has kind of dedicated his life, put himself out there on a limb more than most people, where me and you, we pay lip service to this every once in a while when something pops up in the news. Our guest today is quite literally devoting his life to it. And I look at somebody that with great admiration that works his tail off to try and do the right thing. He's someone that if you're paying attention to any of the things going on with transgenderism and kids being kind of pursued into becoming transgender, Billboard Chris is with us. He is a dad, a guy that jumped on the scene because he saw that this was all sorts of wrong. And we're really happy to have him on. What's going on, Chris?
Thanks, guys. I'm thrilled to be here. So thankful you're helping us spread this message, because for over 2 years now, I've been out on the street just having one conversation at a time with people, and I was happy to do that. So anytime someone like yourself comes along to help boost this message to however many people are listening, I'm extremely grateful, because there's nothing more crazy and harmful and destructive for our kids than this whole business of trying to change their sex.
You know, the crazy part about this, Chris, is David and I, for a long time, we were doing kind of more of a sports show. We had another show called Cuesta Dos. It was just kind of us doing more sports related stuff. We talked some politics. And then at one point, that show got disbanded. And I said to Dave, I'm like, listen, me and you, we're both, we're knowledgeable about the things that we like and we don't like. We know why we like and we don't like them. And it's important that people that can have a voice do it. And I think you kind of take that same role where you have the ability to have a voice, and you decided, you know what, this is a fight worth fighting. And here you are and you're doing it. And we're kind of, I think we took that same position where if there's something worth fighting for, something worth getting right, we're going to do it. So, I mean, that's why I'm really happy you decided to come on, and it gives a chance for me and Dave to kind of help that fight a little more. And it's honestly the most important fight, I think, of our lives, because it affects children. It affects the future. It affects the most vulnerable people. Now, I want to ask you real quick, what made you really start doing this? You're a father, and you, so what's your inspiration for getting into this? What was the trigger that clicked you into doing this?
Honestly, I just learned about it. And as a dad of 2 girls, at the time they were 8 and 10, I've been at this just over 2 years, 10, 12 now. But man, we can't live in a world that tries to change the sex of children. Okay? Like, that's it. I cannot stay quiet while tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids are being harmed, when all these kids are things like autism and anxiety and depression, and there might have been abuse or trauma or whatever. They have all these other underlying conditions that aren't being treated. But this cult of gender has taken over our society. There's no science to this. None. This entire thing is a belief system. It is a pseudo religion, and it is harming our kids. And we can't live in a world like this. And as a dad of girls, and it's mostly girls around this age that my girls are now, who are coming to believe that they're born in the wrong body and they're really boys on the inside, whatever that means. It's all these kids who are being harmed. And I'm not worried about my kids, but I learned way too much about this, and I decided to take a stand, because what is the point of our lives? It's not just to make money and get a bigger house at the pool. Once you have kids, as you well know now, Alex, it's all about our kids.
Yep.
So we got to go to war, man, because this is a war.
We certainly do. And like I said, I think it's the most important war. And so you kind of touched on, you researched, you did your homework on what this kind of quote unquote gender affirming care and the gender ideology is. One of the things that you're big on is on your billboard, it has some variation of children cannot consent to puberty blockers or a child can't consent to a puberty blocker. For people that don't know what that is or kind of don't have an understanding of why it shouldn't be done, because the way these type of, this gender ideology is just another branch of kind of the critical theory ideologies. It's a gender critical theory. Basically, James Lindsay puts it really well. It's all a version of Marxism. It's a newer version of Marxism. I think he really hits the nail on the head with a lot of that. But you talk about puberty blockers, and I feel like a lot of people that hear about this that don't do the research that you do just kind of hear this and it's like, oh, isn't it right to kind of help kids that are struggling, that are questioning? And if that's the way to do it, I heard they're reversible. What's the harm? So can you kind of talk about what puberty blockers are and why we shouldn't be giving them to our kids?
Yeah, let me just back up a little bit. People should probably know what I do, why I'm called Billboard Chris.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, early September 2020, I put up a billboard in Vancouver, Canada, where I'm from, following the lead of Posey Parker in the UK, this woman who'd put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, "I love J.K. Rowling," the Harry Potter author, because she's spoken out about this. She took a ton of heat for it. And Posey Parker had put up this sign, and it lasted one day, and it got taken down because some people complained on Twitter that it was hateful to love the world's greatest children's author.
And she's and
I got tired of our speech. Right. And I got tired of our speech being erased. Like we're not allowed to talk about an issue harming kids. We're not allowed to talk about this. No, that's not how the world works. So when they took down that sign, I said, no, we cannot have this. This is not how our Western society can possibly operate. We have a lot of bad things going on in the world today, and our culture is crumbling in many respects. But we have to be able to talk about important issues. So I put up a big billboard that said the same thing. It also lasted a day because a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech. It says, "I heart J.K. Rowling." That's it. A big red heart on it is hate speech. And they took it down. So then I put up a bunch in Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Utah, Washington, D.C., and Times Square. So that was, someone had called me Billboard Chris in some chat, and I thought, okay, that sticks. So Chris, then because
you made your mistake because it wasn't a rainbow heart. If it was a rainbow heart, then you would have been good.
Well, even in this scenario, I'm sure it would be hate speech, just like gays against groomers is now a far right-wing group that just had their PayPal taken away for the harm of speaking up for kids. But anyway, because I can't put up a billboard in Canada, there's only two main sign companies and neither one will work with me. I'm not going to let them silence me. So it's not hate speech, and I can say it. So I had some signs made, and I became a billboard. And I went and stood right where that original billboard was, and then I started having conversations with people downtown. And I just haven't stopped since then. I've been traveling all across Canada, and now I travel all around the US. And I've been out on the street for probably 2,000 hours having street conversations, taking abuse, getting assaulted, getting arrested, had my arm broken in Montreal. That was fun. And I just keep going, because if you keep going and you never stop, eventually people like yourselves take notice, right? This is the theory. And eventually you get traction and some bigger things happen. And finally, I got some bigger things happening in the States, especially with these Boston Children's Hospital videos that I tweeted out, which they removed from their website. But anyway, so that's my background. To get into what puberty blockers are, these are cancer drugs being given to kids to stop their bodies from developing. So it's a drug called Lupron, usually Lupron. That's an injection. Sometimes these kids get an implant put under their arm or in their thigh that lasts for a year. It's called Histrelin, but it's the same thing. And this drug has been approved by the FDA to treat prostate cancer in men, endometriosis, uterine fibroids in women. Same exact drug has been given to pedophiles, because instead of physically castrating them, this drug chemically castrates them, destroys all sex drive. And so this is a very harsh drug. Women can only go on it for a period not longer than 6 months for endometriosis because the side effects are very harsh. But we're giving this chemical castration drug to children as young as 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, as soon as they hit Tanner stage 2 of puberty. So the technical term for this is when they hit Tanner stage 2. For a girl, this is a year or two before she's had her period. Maybe her breasts have just started to form. So they're going to be like 9, 10 years old. Boys, probably a year or two older. And it stops puberty because apparently it would be traumatic for a girl to start developing into a woman. And it would be traumatic for a boy to start developing into a man. So this drug literally stops girls' breasts from growing. Their hips won't get wider. Boys' penises don't grow. It reduces their bone density. And on the surface, people might go, oh, is that such a big deal? Yeah, well, yeah, obviously it's bad. A young girl in Sweden just suffered spinal fractures while she was on this drug.
Yeah.
She was on it for 3 years. She has osteopenia, which is like early stage osteoporosis. She's in chronic pain. This isn't isolated. This is a listed side effect of this drug. A young mom I talked to in California, her daughter lost 11% of her bone density at a time her bones should have been getting way stronger because kids' bones are soft, right? So that's one thing. So stop puberty so they don't develop. That's just the first step. And this always goes together with the second step, which is the opposite sex hormones.
I have to ask real quick, how is this not considered a eugenics practice? We are quite literally doing experiments with drugs that are off label. We really only understand that they do the one thing, they block the puberty, but we're now finding out a lot about what the secondary side effects are. And, we were all, as a Western society, after we learned about what Hitler was doing with the Jews and the eugenics projects, we were all mortified when we found out what they were doing to children and things like that. And now here we go. And it seems like, it's bizarre because it's the same type of group of people, right? It's a lot of your collectivists. It's even though people don't want to believe that Nazis and fascists are on the left, they're a branch of socialism. So it's the same people doing the similar type of stuff. And it's how you're trying to open people's eyes to things like this. But I think we need to start kind of calling it more what it is. This is very much in the branch of a eugenics type of thing because we're doing human experiments and trying to find out what they do after. And we're doing it on our kids. And that's the worst part. We're doing it on our kids.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, the eugenics argument. It's hard to argue against it. I think for a lot of these people, so with eugenics, it's intentional. A lot of these people are just, what's the term? Useful idiots. They're true believers in this religion of gender. And you have all these young women pushing this. Young white women mostly are kind of the foot soldiers of this. Are they all evil? Do they all want eugenics? No. But they've been deceived. And like any cult, it's the victims who then become the perpetrators. They're recruited into it and then they become the recruiters. And we've seen this incredible spike among young girls transitioning. We haven't seen this spike with boys. It is up. And I think boys don't get enough attention on this, and I should talk more about it myself. But it is really exploding among the girls. And it's the culture now. When you go out on the street with me, and maybe I can, next time I'm around you guys, let's go hang out on the street and do something.
Come to New York, come to Poughkeepsie. I'll come into the city. If you come to New York City, let me know. I'll come walk with you.
You're around
I'm there a few times a year.
We'll exchange numbers. You'll shoot me a text or a call or something.
You got it. And it's a little different in New York. It's not nearly as bad as other places, actually. But I see these young group of women walking down the street, and I know almost every time where I'm from, Vancouver, other cities, that I'm going to get abuse from them. And the young guys aren't like that. They're relieved that I'm out there. And the big athletes, the strong guys, I never, ever have to worry about these guys. Literally never. Unless they're... The only violence I get from big guys one time was in Montreal, and that was Antifa. That was different.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are just domestic terrorists. They don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, man, I think there's a lot of true believers pushing this. And of course, there are people intentionally funding this who know exactly what they're doing. And I think they're just kind of crazy too. But yeah, there's certainly a eugenics component to this, especially with autistic kids, because half these kids or more are on the spectrum. And that's being totally ignored by all the autism societies.
Yeah.
So before I cut you off, you were just finishing up with the part one. Now jump into the part two now. You were going to talk about they're given the opposite hormones there, the opposite sex hormones.
Yeah, so they stop their own hormones from coming. Then they give the opposite sex's hormones. So they'll look more like the opposite sex. They're doing this to 13-year-olds.
Ridiculous.
In fact, get this, guys. So Johanna Olsen Kennedy runs Children's Hospital of Los Angeles Gender Clinic, one of the biggest. Tons of kids in LA, of course, Southern California, super liberal state. You get tons of kids wanting to transition there. She runs it. She's one of the top people in the whole US for this. She got a grant from the NIH, National Institute of Health, of $5.7 million. It went to 4 different children's hospitals. Went to LA, UCSF, Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago and Boston.
Jesus.
$5.7 million grant to study these kids on cross-sex hormones. And part of the grant was an application to reduce the age these kids got the opposite sex hormones from 13 to 8.
That's unthinkable to think that these people that are doing this too are also parents. That's probably the worst part to think about, Chris. Like, to be quite honest, that a lot of these grown men and women that are doctors, and a lot of it's women that are doing it, I think we need to note that a lot of the doctors, and I think if people, I watched What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. We did a whole episode on it. And it's disgusting to see that these people, obviously, a lot of them have kids and they're still willing to do this. And those are the ones that I think we need to place in the evil category. They're the ones that are, maybe some of them are indoctrinated, but for the most part, I think they know what they're doing and what they're attempting to do here.
Man, I have no words for it. I have absolutely no words. We do not know the effect of our own hormones on our developing brain.
No.
Let alone the opposite sex's hormones. Yes, girls have a tiny amount of testosterone naturally in their body. We're giving them doses that don't belong. And obviously their bodies can't handle it because what's happening to these girls? Well, they get deep voices. They're going to grow a beard. They're going to get hair everywhere. It causes other things down below, like bottom growth. People can look that up if they want. I'm not going to get into it. This gets too obscene.
Yeah.
But one of the side effects of testosterone use is vaginal and uterine atrophy. So these girls have to get a hysterectomy. They're cutting out their uterus. Sometimes just by choice. They call these gender affirming hysterectomies, which a doctor at Boston Children's Hospital has an inspirational video about. But a lot of times they have to get their uterus removed because it's atrophied. And they're cutting out their ovaries as well. So now they can never produce estrogen. So either way, even if they wake up when they're 25 and go, what the heck did I do to my body? They're now a lifelong medical patient, forever reliant on some external source of estrogen or testosterone, whatever they decide to do. Each one of these kids is worth at least $1 million to the pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
And this is sold as helping children to be who they really are. What? Sterilizing kids, chopping off body parts, turning them into a medical patient is not helping a child be who they really are. It should be the most obvious thing in the world. But somehow all the medical establishment and all the political establishment has been captured by this complete and utter child abuse nonsense.
Now, I got to ask, Chris, when you're out on the street, do you happen to see like a certain age range that will really attack you over age ranges that will at least listen? And because to me, it's really weird. Now, maybe I was raised in more of like a traditional kind of aspect, but it would be really weird to see someone 40 years old be told about a child going on puberty blockers and them not even having the question of like, wait, what the hell is a puberty blocker? Like, you don't just block puberty. That's not a thing that you stop. So I gotta say, there must be some kind of discrepancy between the age ranges you might even get on the street.
It's huge, man. Okay. So 90% of the abusive comments I get are from young white women, liberal women under the age of 25. This is the demographic that's been captured.
Yes.
Abigail Schreier wrote a book called Irreversible Damage: The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters.
Yep.
And the young guys are not like this at all. And of course, you're going to get exceptions, of course, right? It's a big world out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the main demographic. I almost never have to worry about men of any age. Same thing with women, like grown up women, people with kids, they almost all get it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black community, especially less than any other community, they all support me. I can count on one hand the number of Black men who have not supported me. Probably 2 people who I've come across.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had thousands and thousands of negative interactions.
Yeah.
And, and it's interesting because to me, you look at this and, you're referencing your other video that you just put up where the white under 25-year-old protester was arguing with you. I think it was in DC when you were in DC trying to debate you. And then what was it? It was a middle-aged, maybe a little older Black man coming in and telling her how stupid she sounds. And it kind of just goes right to what you were saying, where white, liberal, really confused woman, and then your support coming from the Black community there. Now, one thing I do have to say too about this that I find a little ridiculous. In a Western society, we've always looked at kind of, what happens in the Middle East to some women under Sharia law, where they get genital mutilation, and we're all up in arms, or even in some of the tribal areas in Africa where it's still a practice that there is some sort of genital mutilation going on. And, Western society, oh my God, that is so terrible. How could they do that? They're savage. And then those same people that would probably put a flyer out in the front lawn if Joe Biden told them to about it would be okay with getting it done to their daughters if they asked them to do it. It is the most hypocritical thing. And it's just like, I don't know how people can look themselves in the mirror and go to bed knowing that they are actually okay in supporting voluntary genital mutilation of kids who get incensed because there's a pimple on their face and it ruins their world. Like, I don't understand the mentality of allowing children to make these type of decisions, and I never will. It's just it's so hypocritical. It really is. That might be the best way to put it. They're hypocritical, the people that can be up in arms about one thing, but be so okay with something else that's so disgusting and terrible.
So to be a trans kid, and there's no such thing as a trans kid, but when I say that word, just put apostrophes around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's celebrated, right? These kids get celebrated. These kids are largely misfits. They don't have a ton of friends. They're struggling in life. A lot of them just speak terribly with their parents. A lot of them have autism. A lot of them have eating disorders, and they're just not thriving in life. And they identify as trans, and then they get love bombed and celebrated in their school. Mm-hmm. They go to this QSA, the Queer Straight Alliance Club at school, and they get indoctrinated to believe that the reason they're not fitting in is because they're trans. Oh, okay. It's because I'm trans. What does that mean? This is the crucial question. What does it mean to be trans? Mm-hmm. I've asked it a million times. No one can ever tell me. Because what's happened with this movement is they've conflated it with being gay. The LGBT community. Mm-hmm. Okay, we got to get that word out of our language. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as an LGBT community. There's LGB. This is who people love, who they're attracted to sexually. That's got nothing to do with stating that you are the sex, that you are the opposite sex. It's got nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. But they've had political success combining these, because who wants to speak up against the LGBT community? Nobody. You're the huge bigot if you do that.
Yep.
Because they conflate this with gay rights.
Yep.
And so when all the gay rights were won this century, mainly, all these activist organizations turned their focus to trans rights, and they got to keep the donations flowing. They got to keep the doors open. And people used to warn about the slippery slope or whatever with gay rights. Well, unfortunately, they were proved right, because all this money and all this institutional power has moved the focus to this delusional movement that teaches that we can be born in the wrong body. Why? Just because we don't conform to stereotypes? David, you've got a beard, but dude, if you were more effeminate, would that make you a girl, or would that just make you an effeminate man?
Exactly.
I mean, we've questioned every once in a while with you growing up.
But it's the funniest thing, because we talked about the same exact thing before, and it's so weird, because like even when I was growing up, you would still hear the term tomboy. which is non-existent in this day and age for obvious reasons. But you would still hear that because even though like this person is into things that are not exactly usually feminine or usually masculine, like that doesn't mean that they're not a boy or a girl. It was a very simple concept that for some reason dropped off. And I mean, we kind of know why. We can always make guesses, and they're honestly being very open about it a lot of times. But it's just, it blows my mind that even some people that around the same age as me, around the same age as Alex, who grew up hearing tomboy and understanding that concept in the first place, can now switch up to just, little Timmy's playing with Barbies, he must want to be a girl. Like it doesn't make any sense.
What if Timmy has a big sister? He's probably playing with Barbies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, but you've got these videos from Boston Children's Hospital. This is the number one ranked children's hospital in the country. They started the first gender clinic in the United States of America 15 years ago. They have the top experts in the world. And in their own videos they produced, they said they see kids as young as 2 and 3, and parents tell them all the time that their children knew seemingly from the womb that they were transgender. things like a little girl trying to pee standing up, or a little boy who doesn't want to get a haircut, playing with the opposite gender toys. She says that. They even quote it on the screen. So toys now determine our child's gender. This is a radical idea out of academia that stereotypes determine our sex, and that we're all basically performing gender. Judith Butler teaches that we perform our gender, that we're essentially all drag artists, just performing masculinity or femininity. And these people now think that if you're more feminine, it means you're trans and that you need to medicalize your body.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing you said about the performative thing, because that's a big word in the gender studies community, is that the reason why, one of the big things they say is, well, gender and sex are different. Because, sex is what you're assigned at birth, but gender you get to choose, and it's a feeling, and, it's all societal. So everything we do is performative in society anyway. It's based off of, and then they start going to historical references, and a lot of it makes no sense. If you really listen to it, they're not, Judith Butler says a lot of big words. She's not a very smart person. She's a very manipulative person that knows how to use language and write it in a fancy way, with support of the peer review process, which James Lindsay, Helen Proclose, and Peter Boghossian really put a hole in with that whole peer review with the grievance studies that they did. But
the dog park one is the best.
Dog park one is such so good. They're also good, honestly, and that's the ridiculous process. So you touched on a lot there, and you touched on kind of one thing that I read, because one of the things David knows I like to do, I like to read things that hurt me a lot. I love to, I read the things that I hate the most, because I'm not going to understand why I hate it if I don't know about it. And one of the things I've been slowly forcing myself to do, because it's difficult to get through, is reading Genderqueer. Oh. And that is a graphic novel about an individual who transitioned and is essentially encouraging young individuals, where we mentioned tomboy. You mentioned the Queer Straight Alliance, the QSA, which is mentioned in that graphic novel. And when I say graphic novel, I mean graphic novel. And this is a long comic book about a very confused individual. And when you read it, you discover that she probably suffered under abusive parents, not in the way that they beat her, but they neglected her severely. If anyone's ever opened up this book and you read about how their parents treated them, maybe they're over exaggerating, because kids, and especially petulant children like the artists and a lot of leftists are, over exaggerate things. But if what they're saying is true, their parents just kind of let them and their sister do whatever the hell they wanted. And that's not parenting. Chris, you're a dad. I mean, David, you've been around, you have nieces and nephews, and you've definitely watched our nephews more than enough. You got to parent. You got to give some guidance. And yeah, it's just a disgusting book. And you mentioned the QSA, and that kind of sparked me. And I encourage everybody to go. You don't have to pay for it. Honestly, just go search Genderqueer, find the stupid artist's name, the author's name, and write online free. They love to put this stuff out. You can find it online. And I encourage everybody to read it, just because don't take Chris's word for a lot of these things. Don't take mine and David's word. Go and look at what they're trying to put in schools. They are actively trying to have this graphic novel in school libraries, not only in high school, but also in middle school. So not to go off on an aside there, but the QSA got me into it. And it's such a disgusting thing. And the whole topic we're talking about is gross. It really is.
Let's talk about that a little more though.
Go ahead.
So sometimes they're called QSAs, sometimes GSAs, Gay Straight Alliance, sometimes Gender and Sexuality Alliance or whatever. So there's a woman I met in March. Her name's Abigail Martinez. She's from El Salvador originally. And I was at the Heritage Foundation, which is this big conservative think tank in DC. And they were having a conference and she spoke about how her daughter Yaeli, Yaeli, grew up normal girly girl, you know, wearing princess dresses, all that, just typical stuff. Got into high school, started struggling, was getting teased, was getting bullied about her looks and stuff, and got involved in the QSA, Queer Straight Alliance Club. It's like a recruiting center. You know, they bring in pizza. So the kids that don't have friends and stuff, it's like, hey, come on in. They get love bombed, just like in any cult. They get food. They get a new friend group. And this girl was indoctrinated to believe that she was a boy. And so did the school who caused this identity crisis, did they tell mom that her daughter was now a boy and had a new name? Of course, new pronouns? No, they hid it from her. They hid it from her for months.
Which should be illegal.
It should be. They created an identity crisis in this child and then purposely hid it from her mom. A big part of the reason they hid it is because they knew that her mom was a Catholic. This is violating so many laws.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure they would have hidden it anyway. Yeah, but they just assumed that as a Catholic, she's not going to be okay with turning her girl into a boy. You know what? Abigail Martinez was much more accommodating than I would have been. And she was even going along with the name change and the pronouns. She wanted to help her daughter, like all parents do. Because there's nothing a parent loves more in the world than their kids. And you get these people who've known this child for 2 hours, some counselor in the school, some 24-year-old teacher with blue hair, who are childless themselves, who've just graduated from gender studies from Brown University. And they think that they have this savior complex where they're going to save our children from their own terrible, bigoted parents. And so anyway, the girl wanted to go on testosterone because she was taught that that's what she needed to find happiness. Mom knew that testosterone wasn't the best thing for a girl. Mom knew that a girl needed therapy and health for her mental health. But because she didn't want to put her on testosterone, the state of California took her into custody. They put this girl in a group home with other so-called trans kids. And while she was separated from her mom on testosterone that the state was now giving her, this little girl knelt down in front of a train. And police had to pick her body up in pieces. So the state of California killed that girl. It's bad enough what's happening to our kids socially. It's worse to do this physically. And then you combine how they're stripping parents' rights away to protect our kids, our one job in this world. They're taking that right away from us. Parents need to wake up and get going because this is an all-out assault on the very foundation of family.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you thought, because you could see it in stories now that a lot of parents are actually waking up to this. You could see the way that parents are going to like schools and figuring that this is actually happening. But I was going to ask, do you think that a major part in how this even got through to happen to kids so much now is because of just, I'm not trying to put it in bad terms, but parents' ignorance to what was happening, to what was being told to their kids. And they just never knew that this was a thing that was going on in schools or that this was a thing that was going on in hospitals until basically it was too late. And now it's already happening to kids at such a degree where, like you said, like that's that terrible story that, I'm amazed that you could hear that and even recite it because it just in a calm manner, because that just pisses me off hearing it.
Yeah.
But
it's all on video. I'm going to retweet it again. Actually, I told the mom that I was never going to stop telling her story, and I'm not. Now, You're absolutely right. Parents had no idea this stuff got put into our school system because when we went to school, I'm older than you guys, but it's changed pretty quick.
Yeah.
We were taught reading, writing, arithmetic, penmanship, some history. There was no ideology in schools. And now they're teaching ideology. They're teaching kids what to think, not how to think. And in certain states, parents just have no rights. In Washington State now, when your kid's 13, you have no more say over the medical care. This child, a 13-year-old child in Washington State, can go get puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, even a double mastectomy without their parents' knowledge or consent, using their parents' private health insurance. And the parent will get the bill for the copay, but the drug and procedure is redacted. Okay, this is like 1984, to use an overused analogy.
Yes.
But it 100% is. And in California right now, so even if you guys fix this in New York or New Jersey,
fat chance.
California, I'm working on it. Some great New Jersey moms. But in California, Scott Wiener, this senator, living up to his last name, introduced a bill that makes California a sanctuary state. So any kid from all over the country can run away from home to California to get this so-called gender affirming care, and they won't return the child home. A non-custodial parent can kidnap the child from Texas, bring them to California, and California will ignore arrest warrants. They will ignore court orders, subpoenas. They will ignore child custody agreements, and they will transition that child. And there's nothing the custodial parent can do about it.
You were on Timcast IRL not too long ago, and I remember watching it and listening to it. Great show. I recommend everyone go watch Tim Pool and Timcast. He does awesome work. But he always likes to talk about civil war. It's kind of a big thing he constantly brings up is civil war. And I think that what you just hit on right there is more of a reason for people to go to war. And I don't know how necessarily to cause something like a civil war, because California doing something like that. And we saw what parents could do in Virginia already with Glenn Youngkin, that when parents really get fixed on something, they move the needle. They get things done. And if you're telling parents, and especially if this starts happening a lot in the southern states, your Texas and your places where they are strong and they are very, and this goes beyond conservative. This goes beyond liberal, because right now we know, if you're not a full-on Marxist, you're on the right. That's kind of how it is, because I mentioned Tim Pool, I mentioned James Lindsay, two guys that sure as hell are not conservatives. They are not right-leaning dudes, but they've been forced into being called right-leaning because everything else, if you're not a crazy leftist, you're on the right now. But this is the way I see the Civil War starting. California doing that law and other states start doing something similar. And now you're messing with our kids. A lot of people's eyes are going to open up. And I think it's going to just happen more and more. As they start getting more and more radical, it's going to open up more. And it needs to. Because a lot of what you're saying, I don't know how familiar you are with Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution in China and what occurred under his watch. And a lot that I see going on here is very similar there, where his whole goal was a student revolution, was to, tell the students, your parents are wrong. And eventually, once he indoctrinates enough, go start killing your parents, beating your parents, killing teachers that won't renounce the four olds. And here we are. We have kids being told your parents are wrong. They don't know the best way to care for you. They don't understand you. They don't understand what you're going through. And here, we will help you. Don't listen to them. And how long until they start saying, your parents are evil and you need to kill them because they don't. And kids are young and impressionable. And we've seen it already. We've seen the rise of leftism amongst a lot of kids, and colleges are doing it in a terrible way. So this reminds me, and it's, the slippery slope, this might sound going into extremes, but I don't think we're as far away as people think we might be from those type of things occurring.
Yeah, look what happened to Eastern Europe and South America. They all had their communist revolution.
Yep.
And that destroyed every single country, and it lasted for 60, 70, 80 years, whatever it was. And that cycle finally ended in most places. Well, they're trying to bring it here.
Yep.
And you mentioned how this is like Marxism. People get confused by that. So James Lindsay has his books, Race Marxism, Queer Marxism. And it's basically this idea that instead of it being your economic class that is the source of your disparity, which makes you the oppressee versus the oppressor, it's this same idea of this oppressor-oppressee dynamic, whereas now it's white people are just naturally the oppressors by virtue of being white. So that's race Marxism.
Yep.
And then queer Marxism is that cis heteronormative people, heterosexual people are the oppressors, and all these queer people, but no one can define queer, are the oppressed. And so it creates this dynamic in civilization where you've got this constant division going on. And the left loves it. They drive this division all day long. You got Joe Biden calling half the country semi-fascists.
Yeah.
Have you been to this half of the country? They're just regular people living out in the suburbs, living out in the country, trying to take care of their families, teach their kids. They're just normal people. I've all these so-called far right people, and I've been getting called far right. The Boston Globe, all the papers in Boston this last week said that it was a bunch of far right protesters that came to the hospital. So I went to Boston Children's Hospital last week. I had about 12 people come out with me. Most were lifelong Democratic voters. I think only 2 weren't. They were just gentle moms, a couple grandmas, some dads whose children have all been captured by this ideology. And almost all these kids, by the way, are on the autism spectrum. And it's really hard for the parents to reach them because they've been so thoroughly indoctrinated. And they just don't want their kids getting sterilized. They're okay with gender nonconformity. We are all okay with gender nonconformity.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean your child's the opposite sex. And who do we have on the opposite side of the street? The counter protesters who came to defend what the gender clinic is doing. Antifa. We got a bunch of people chanting, "All cops are bastards." These are the people defending Boston Children's Hospital's sterilization of youth. The same people who 2 years ago were burning down buildings as part of Black Lives Matter. So if those are the people defending you, it's not hard to tell which side of history you're on when it comes to this argument.
It's just an idea, Chris.
And that's the most amazing thing, though, because you brought up how it's a cult. It's basically a pseudo religion. Even if you want to go as far as basically to say it's a religion,
it is a religion.
I feel like cult even emphasizes it more. But you just said Antifa on the other side counter protesting you, saying all cops are bastards, something that has nothing to do with what you're there for. Absolutely nothing to do. I mean, I know there's like the meme of calling them NPCs, but that's basically what they are. Like they're in a cult. They only have so many talking points that they know. They only have so many things that they'll repeat. And you've seen it from video. If you go into any of like these groups in Antifa or whoever it is, whatever leftist group is protesting at a time, and you start trying to ask them questions, whoever is leading the protest will say, don't answer. Because if you try to actually ask them an individual question, these people might not be as crazy as that group is, but they don't ever want you to leak anything. They want you to stay in that cultish formation. And it's incredible to witness, and I'm very happy that people are waking up to it, and especially because, I mean, honestly, you going out there with the billboards attached to you probably has done a great more than the billboard that you had you paid for to be put up, and like 1,000 times better because you're actually able to talk to people, and then
that's right.
That person probably goes and talks to other people. It's not just some dumb billboard. No, it's a human connection to understand what's happening here.
And it helps, Chris, because you're articulate. You got the facts down before you went out there. You're not just going off talking points. You are citing specific things, and you're just a normal guy. You're not a lobbyist. You're not a billionaire. You're not this big shot, a radio host or someone like that, or like I think your impact is felt more because of those things, because you're just somebody that gives people bravery because you're willing to go sacrifice it all. You are actually willing right now to sacrifice everything in order to try and create a better future for your kids. And it's admirable. And I think the more people kind of hear your story and get to know you and hear what you're doing, it's a lot easier to get behind somebody like you than it would be, for instance, other people are doing great work. Like, Glenn Beck talks about this, Tim Pool I mentioned, and some other, big time guys on the right. But people are like, man, this is their job. But this wasn't your job. This is something that you picked up. Now, I want to talk about something because you mentioned that all these kids are worth like $1 million to this whole entire lobby that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, you talked about Matt Walsh and his Vanderbilt thing that he
Yes.
just broke out. Break down a little bit the Vanderbilt stuff, because I want to get Chris's kind of opinion on what went on here with the Matt Walsh thing and what's his opinion on it all.
Yeah, so him and his team researched what was going on in the Vanderbilt, basically gender clinic. And if you know any of the stories of these gender clinics, it's almost the same thing. It's always the same thing. Basically, that they're hiding, that they are doing not only are they giving puberty blockers to kids as young as Chris is mentioning, but they're also doing genuine surgeries on kids. Even if it's a 15-year-old getting a double mastectomy, you see a picture that I think you understand how bad that is for someone to have.
Yeah.
But the most interesting thing to me, which exactly why it's a good thing to be brought up, is that in the first video he posts, it is mentioned Dr. Shane Taylor, when they opened in 2008, said that it's a big moneymaker. And it's a very interesting thing that it almost always seems to start off as a big moneymaker, and then you flood in the activists to make it more of, it's healthcare for kids. Like this is actual care for kids. Like it even mentions that they brought in the trans buddies, which are activists that sit in with kids to listen to the doctors talk to them, so that they don't say anything hateful to the kids, or they don't say anything that'll actually hurt them in the long run. It is honestly, it's vile. It's vile and disgusting to witness how these things come about. And I think it was a fantastic grab by Matt Walsh, because even though you may know that this is basically happening in these clinics, it's good to actually see it come out. The videos, the actual documents. It's always good, because then you could show it to someone and say, look, I'm not making this up. This is them in their own words.
So yeah, Chris, I want to just get your opinion on kind of that whole entire Vanderbilt thing. And is it kind of just business as usual with what you've been seeing, or is there anything kind of new that kind of pops out at you here?
Honestly, as sad as it is, it's business as usual. Mm-hmm. Many places are even worse. I've got video from a Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, where they admit to cutting off the breasts of a 12-year-old. And they're castrating 16-year-olds. They're not just castrating them. I don't know how much we want to get into this, but they do these inversions. So they castrate the boys, then they do a penile inversion to make a neo-vagina. Mm-hmm. But because if these boys were on puberty blockers, the penis never grew, there's not enough tissue. So what did they do? And they're doing these surgeries as young as 16. They will cut out some of the boy's colon or his stomach and use that to form the lining of this neo-vagina, which has to be dilated forever. Otherwise, it closes up because it's just a wound, of course. And guess what, guys? We haven't touched on this yet. A lot of these kids have autism, and there's trauma and abuse, and who knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of these boys, we know historically from all studies into gender dysphoria, when kids had real gender dysphoria, not this craze, but from a young age, boys that were really effeminate wanted to be girls, and it lasted all throughout their adolescence. We've had academic studies into this. And if you look at the most recent one, and they're all consistent, the most recent study followed 139 boys from the age of 5 years old all the way into their 20s. 88% of them grew out of this gender dysphoria. It just went away.
Yep.
Because the cure was their own hormones.
Surprise, surprise.
What a surprise. Testosterone cured these kids of this feeling. 64% of these kids grew up to be gay. Also not super surprising.
Yeah.
Really effeminate boys sometimes grow up to be gay. Mm-hmm. Now today, what they're doing to these kids, they're blocking puberty. Mm-hmm. They're convincing them that they're trans, and they're blocking puberty. They're giving them estrogen. They're doing these surgeries, these terrible surgeries. They're destroying their bodies for life. And then what happens to some of these kids? They get into their 20s and they go, what the heck did you do to me? I'm just gay. They figure it out. Mm-hmm. I tweeted the story not long ago of a 25-year-old man who just figured out he's gay, but he'd had all these surgeries done. And there's always complications because this is gruesome stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This guy developed what's called a fistula, or a passageway between his urinary tract and his neovagina. And he's been leaking urine continuously for 5 years. Doctors can't fix it. They just want to close him up completely. They don't know how to do that either. And one of these infections one of these days is going to kill him because these things spread.
So terrible.
These stories are not unique.
Yeah.
This is affecting thousands. There are 42,000 girls on GoFundMe right now raising money to get their breasts cut off for gender purposes, girls and young women. That's just the ones raising money, never mind the ones who have it covered.
Yep.
So
we just can pay for it.
We should definitely call this as it is, because it is a group of activist leftists that are actively trying to sterilize a generation, a large swath of a generation, because the surgeries that you're talking about, when they're removing a uterus, they're removing ovaries, they are creating a neovagina, they're not getting these sexual organs back. And on top of that, if they're given these puberty blockers, these individuals don't experience this arousal. They don't experience I've heard you mention this a bunch of times. They don't experience in the same way that a person that has not had these surgeries can and will experience them.
They won't get pleasure like we can as an adult. So you had mentioned this earlier, we don't need people to believe us. Please go watch the videos. Yeah. I always tell people, I don't want you to listen to me. And the great thing today versus when I started 2 years ago is we have videos from all the professionals making every argument I could ever possibly make. So I just refer people to the experts. Yeah. But Marcy Bowers is the president of WPATH, the president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. They write the standards of care that these gender clinics can follow. They go even younger than the recommended ages all the times. But Marcy Bowers admitted in a Zoom call with all these other experts, it's on video, I've tweeted it, that literally none of the boys who started on puberty blockers early on, Tanner stage 2 it's called, none of the boys have ever been able to have an orgasm as an adult. So they have destroyed the future sexual function of all of these boys. What child can possibly consent to not being able to have an intimate relationship when they're older? They don't even have a concept of the idea.
I mean, and it goes to a lot, in my field of work, I talk to a lot of different young people, and I've had them tell me things like, oh, I don't have a single friend who hasn't thought about committing suicide, or all of my friends are depressed. All my friends have anxiety. They all have panic attacks. And, and I'll say to them, like, doesn't that seem intentional? If it's a whole group, like if the percentage just rises a fair amount, okay, maybe there is a small issue that popped up. We need to fix it. But when it is a huge majority of kids going through their adolescence now that will actively say, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have panic attacks. And it starts as a fad, but the brain's an amazing thing. The more you continue to tell yourself things, you will make yourself sick. You will make yourself have these things, because we can mimic when someone has legitimate depression, and we see it all the time. And now we convince ourselves that we have it. Our brain will start to work that way, and the chemicals will start to occur, and you will make yourself depressed. But, and then things you're mentioning, I think this goes with a lot of the things that they're doing to kids with the transitioning and stuff like that. We have a whole generation that is being mentally destroyed. And it's allowing people with influence to do these types of things, to get them chemically castrated, to get them sterilized. And I know people don't want to think that there's this conspiracy or nefarious things going on, but we just live in such a naive world where there are evil people out there, everybody. There are people that are evil. There are groups, large groups of people that are evil, that want to do evil things. And what is being done now to our children in terms of their mental health? We talk about a mental health crisis. The mental health crisis is convincing every single kid that they have a mental health problem. That is the mental health crisis, not the fact that it's there. It's that telling kids to go search for yours and find it so we can fix it. Go find the problem that's not there. Not that you're just going through puberty, you're a little confused. Being down on your luck is normal because you're trying to figure out your place in society. No, you're a little sad in puberty, so you must be depressed. You feel a lot of pressure in a big situation. That's a panic attack. No. And it walks hand in hand with what you're doing here with the trans lobby, because I feel like it's just all an attack on our kids in general. And it's a disgusting thing, Chris. And it's something that we need to find a remedy for. And I think things that what you're doing and hopefully what we do here is going to try and build that remedy and kind of give more people more courage to, David and I are just average people too. We do this podcast for fun. Yeah. We both have day jobs. We're at risk doing this in a way, because if our day jobs are not in favor of what we're saying or doing here, we're out. So, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
It's absolutely worth it.
It is worth it to make our kids' futures better.
And you can get another job.
Yep. Yes.
All these people afraid of losing their livelihoods and everything. I get it. I get it. A lot of people cannot do that. So I understand. But you got to look at this with perspective. Okay. Our grandfathers stormed the beaches of Normandy in the middle of machine gun fire, knowing that they had a better chance of not exiting that beach than getting to leave it. And they did it anyway, because there was a great evil trying to destroy our civilization and our way of life. Well, there's a great evil trying to destroy our civilization and our way of life today.
Yep.
But it's not coming to our beaches. Because if there were 1 million creeps coming to our beaches, we'd have 10 million parents there to greet them, and we'd bond them out of existence. Yep. But these 1 million creeps are already here, and they're already all throughout the culture spreading this. So, and for me, in a lot of ways, this is a new world war. It's all over the Western world. Yeah, it's in every country that fought in the world wars.
Yep.
But man, you can't just keep worrying about yourself. Sometimes you got to make sacrifices, and you got to make sacrifices for your kids most of all. And there's lots of other jobs out there and lots of other ways to make a buck. Yep. But we got to get loud, because as soon as enough people speak up against this, guess what? That's when the politicians will feel safe to speak up. They're already starting to feel more safe to speak up. I've seen a massive difference. So we've talked about a lot of gloomy stuff, but let's give some people some hope.
And that's what
I've been in this 2 years.
Yep. Let's talk about the improvements you've seen, Chris. Let's talk about all the improvements you've seen. Let's end this on a happy note.
You got it. 2 years out on the streets. 2 years ago, no one knew what a puberty blocker was. So the first signs I had made in the first month, they said gender ideology does not belong in schools, because for me, it's always been obvious that's the head of the snake. If you don't cut off the head of the snake, you're not going to win anything. If you're graduating 2 million kids every year who believe in this nonsense, you're never going to fix women's rights. You're never going to fix any of these other problems. And no one really was talking about schools. So that was the first sign I had made. And then a month later, I had children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Children are never born in the wrong body. And so I wore these signs, and no one knew what these things were. And I was just getting the word out one by one, doing a few podcasts here and there, but really it was just me standing on the street, standing through Canadian winters in the cold, having conversations. And I was fine with that, because I knew this was going to grow into something. I never had my faith waver one little bit. But today it's amazing. The support I get out on the street is a lot greater than it used to be. I'm getting attention now from all these counter protesters everywhere I go. But they just do my job for me. They help to amplify my message even more. They don't realize it, but I'm using them.
And it just means you're effective. It's the only reason they're there.
But man, so many people are aware of this issue now. One of the top questions I hear is, have you watched Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman? That reached so many people.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson has been talking about this since January of 2021. Ever since Biden took over. And he's made a big difference. And, a lot of people talking about this are making a big difference. But so many know now. And the conservative beast in the United States of America is finally awake. And radical feminists were talking about this before. But there are tens of millions of conservatives. And when they figure out what's going, and when all the different conservative media talk show hosts start going, and they are now. And I think a big part of that is those Boston Children's Hospital videos that I tweeted.
Oh, yeah.
You can't put this back in the box. The news is out, and more people are going to get more informed. And it's simply a matter of time until we put this to a finite end. I firmly believe that. It's simply a question of how many kids are going to be harmed.
I love it. I love it. Dave, before we close out this fantastic show, do you have anything else to add or ask Chris before we jump off?
Not necessarily. I'm very happy to have Chris on. Incredible thing that you're doing, and I would gladly join you anytime you're in DC or in Virginia, or even if you're in like New Jersey, New York, and I'm up there. I'll gladly join you at any time. I would love to.
Awesome, man. I'll be there a lot. I'm getting busy now because I'm even meeting with members of Congress. I met with some last week, so that's awesome. Great. But if I get time for the street, please just keep paying attention to my Twitter and I'll post it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And just as well, if I would gladly come with you if you're in the New York area. That's something I also believe in. I request a sign though. I want to sign as well. I want to sign as well. And Dave, if that happens, we got to get some stuff made with our logo.
Yeah,
we need to know we stand by this.
Signs
we got to make our own. Yeah, we got to do our own stuff there. But yeah, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. What would you like to plug so people can find you, can see what you're doing? You talked about your Twitter. Give some plugs out there so people can see the work that you're doing and the great things you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, billboardchris.com. It's a basic website. I need to hire someone to keep it updated every day. I'm working on hiring someone right now. But that's where you will find my Twitter account as well. My feed is on there. I'm on Twitter. That's where I really do everything. Yeah. At Billboard Chris. Now, it's hard to find me because Twitter's censoring me. I don't show up in the search bar. I'm deemed 18 plus, so you have to enter a birth date. And if you want to see any of my media, you need to adjust your settings to allow sensitive content because these are all the things Twitter's doing to me. But at Billboard Chris, at Billboard Chris on Twitter, Instagram, I'll get going more. And then my website's Billboard Chris. I've got a donate button. If people could donate, that'd be great because it's not cheap traveling around North America. But mostly I just want people to get up to speed and have conversations because it's one conversation at a time, which is going to end this.
So inside the show's description, I'll throw in your Twitter, HTML there.
Thanks.
So people can go directly to yours, and I'll put your website on there so people can visit that as well. But I just want to thank you again for coming on. You're brave. You're extremely courageous. You might not think you are because you're just doing what you think is right, but standing up to this machine that the left has really created all around the Western world and quite literally going out there and doing it on your own for a long time is sheer bravery. And, I thank you. I think David thanks you as well. Yep. You're the type of people that give us the courage to come out and do what we're doing here and attempt to do what we're doing here. So thank you so much again for coming on. We will certainly be by your side and be an ally with you in this for the rest of time until this is fixed.
I love it, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you for sure in DC and New York.
100%.
Awesome. 100%. So again, everybody, this is the Alex Cuesta Show. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go look up the Alex Cuesta Show on the socials. And we'll be back next week with another great show. So everybody, thanks for listening. So long, everyone.